I'd like to answer a viewer question, and it's a very tough question. So that's why sometimes I delay because I want to make sure I am responding with the utmost care. This particular viewer is asking, and I'm going to change the details as I read it, but she wants me to do a show on adult children because those who accuse a parent, in this case, a father, of emotional abuse as a child, and this particular adult child is unwilling to forgive the father. And in this case, in addition, he's asking his mother to choose between them, basically saying, you choose dad or you choose me and my family. Um, it's a relative threat. If you want a relationship with me, you have to break off your relationship with dad. In this case, the child is accusing the father of emotional abuse and saying that the mom is in denial that he really was abusive to them all these years. And so, saying you're just too fearful to admit it. So this viewer is asking, what do I do? Because in this case, this woman has been blocked from her son's life until she makes a decision. So this is one of the harder questions in life, and I get similar questions to this all the time. So what I always default to is, what does God want? And then what is God's order? So in terms of God, he says our spouse first, our kids second. Well, God first, our spouse second, and our kids third before everybody else. So there are many times I've talked to people and I'm like, I don't even like my husband. I don't like my wife. I get that. There are some people that are just hard to live with. But we're living in a culture that, remember, it's disposable. If you don't like a relationship or you're not happy, you have permission to leave that relationship. It has totally upended God's law on marriage and made us think, because it's been happening now for the past 50 years very quickly and easily, that unhappiness can divorce you. So what I want to say to this viewer, first of all, is your responsibility, first and foremost, is to, apart from God, which she's already keeping God first, is to your spouse. If your husband is not abusive to you, he's not touching you, you don't feel unsafe, because you definitely want to make sure everyone feels safe. You're not going to be physically abused, sexually abused, things like that. If those things are happening, you get out of the house and get safe. But in this viewer's example, that's not happening. She says her husband is harsh, but he's always been harsh. And she believes, I'm not in denial. I know he's harsh. But the child is perceiving this relationship to be abuse. Now, I've said this before, and I need to say it again, but abuse is overused so much. Whenever someone comes to me and says, my spouse abused me, I was like, well, tell me, what did that look like? Give me some examples. Oh, my spouse emotionally abused me. I'm sorry about that. Tell me about it. Give me some examples. And one of the things I always want to mention is that abuse is about power and control. I am wanting and very intentionally trying to control you. I am overpowering you. And I say all the time, there's a real big difference just between being mean or just being a jerk and being abusive. We throw that word around because we know in society you'll get permission from your friends to say, oh, you shouldn't be abused. Get out of that relationship. So first of all, it's determining, am I truly being abused? Emotional abuse, we've had people be mean and nasty and say ugly things or call you names. Calling you names is nasty and it's mean, but it's not abusive. Abuse is really things like, I'm taking the car keys or I'm watching the odometer. And if you go more than the miles I know it takes to get to the grocery store and back, I'll be talking to you. That's scary. That's abusing power. But just being a harsh person is not abusive. And what I see in this example is something I've seen before. This adult child seemed as if he may have been more tender or more sensitive. I'll see that a lot when I teach my anger management classes. Anger management is loaded with people who had feelings, and those feelings were, or they were sensitive, and those sensitive feelings were dashed or insulted or whatever, because anger is a secondary emotion. There's always a primary emotion that you're covering up. So, for example, in this example, the son may have felt like he needed tenderness or he needed a loving dad. And this dad was maybe saying things like, stop being a pansy, toughen up. Well, that's not the ideal way to handle a child. It's also not abusive. And that poor child, though, really wanted a tender dad. So in my anger management class, I get a lot of men who were led to believe as boys that boys don't cry, boys don't have tender feelings, boys have to be strong, and therefore they become angry and they lash out. But when you dig deep, you realize that most of them were feelers. They were much more sensitive. Even big, strong, strapping men's men will often say, yeah, I am more empathetic. But if I come off of that rabbit trail and go back to the point of this woman's question, I don't know what it looked like that he was considering abuse. But if you don't believe, you're in denial, then you're okay. If you're not being abused, you're okay. But ultimately, and here's where the super pain comes in, your responsibility is to choose your spouse over your children. Because if anything, in this case, the son, even though he probably doesn't mean it, is trying to use his power over you. If you don't do this, I won't do that. This adult child actually wants this mother to leave a half-century marriage. Half-century. You've been with your spouse for 50 years and you're supposed to leave? That is, as a grandmother of 6 myself, the most painful thing I can think of is to say you won't get to see your grandchildren. You don't get to have them for holidays, birthdays. Don't get to watch them grow up. You have no access to them, and that is wretched pain. It's wrong. But if you chose a child over your spouse, you wouldn't be pleasing the Lord. Because nowhere, again, I say this again and again, nowhere in the Bible does it say, I just want you happy. The Bible says, pick up your cross and follow me. Pick it up. It doesn't say it's going to be light. He says it's going to be heavy. It's going to hurt. He had a shoulder wound, Jesus did, when he carried his cross. Pick it up. It's going to hurt. But follow me. I will lead you. So the Lord is teaching this woman a very painful lesson of pleasing God, keeping her eyes fixed on him, staying true to her vow, and foregoing something very good, which is a relationship with her son and with her grandchildren. It will hurt, probably makes you cry most days. And it's hurting the grandchildren too. But we cannot allow ourselves to be threatened. I think of a woman too, if we go to the son's perception as well. I think of a woman I knew once who's since gone to see the Lord. And she used to tell how badly her mother abused them as kids. My mom was abusive. She never gave examples of true abuse, in my perspective. Mom hit her with a brush once. Mom said something mean when she cut her leg once. But this sensitive woman, she was sensitive. Her siblings said, we weren't abused. We were just disciplined. We were just spanked. But as a matter of fact, this woman doesn't believe in spanking because she felt it was abusive. And perhaps Many people overdo the spanking. I am the first to admit that. But our perceptions are our own. We do need, oftentimes, the outside perspective of people around us watching and thinking, is that abuse? Maybe that's why this woman wrote me. Is that abuse? She hasn't given me any clues that she was abused, especially considering she's been with her husband for a half century and said, I don't think it was abused. I just think he was harsh. So I don't know where you are, but I do, for one, want you always to recognize what is true abuse. We are not required by God to subject ourselves to abuse. We are required to pick up our crosses, to carry them. Whether your cross is being an adult child of divorce, whether your cross is, I struggle with same-sex attraction, Bible says don't act on it. I don't love my spouse, I love another person, don't act on it. There's so many crosses that we carry. I have cancer. I want to just euthanize myself. Don't act on that. You can help the world by acting and living in accordance with God's will. When other people watch you, maybe your son will say, you're crazy, you're ridiculous. But when you live in truth, the Lord is also speaking to him. One day he'll see the truth. If you live in love, maybe, just maybe, God will open your son's eyes and allow him to let you still see those children, to realize he's hurting his children. He's hurting you. And ultimately, he's hurting his family. But we still need to validate his feelings because they are real. I hope I've answered this question. Of course, when I do get these viewer questions, know that there are so many fine details. And of course, I'm going to leave some out. And of course, I'm not going to be telling you the whole picture because A, I don't have it, and B, some of the times I need to leave the details out. But whenever you're questioning anything, always do what's right. I say this all the time, do what's right and leave the consequences to God. Or questions like this, stay within God's order and give the consequences to God. God, you tied me to my husband. I vowed till death do us part, and I acknowledge that. I'll carry that cross. And I'll carry the cross of my son disagreeing with me. But I do know that when you die and go to heaven, your reward will be great, greater than those who put down their crosses and ran from them. If you have any other questions, send them my way. I'd love to give it a go at answering them. I try to stay in line with God, his church, the Catholic Church, and the Catechism, the Magisterium. What does God say? I'm Dr. Christine Bacon. Thanks for watching another informational Bacon Bit. And please, no matter how rough life gets, remember to live it sunny side up.